Welcome to Volunteering, Making It Count in Your Career. I'm Nadia Whiteside, Coaching and Program Director with Career Transition Center, and I'm delighted that you're joining us for this webinar. So let's talk a little bit about volunteering today and how to really leverage it in your career. Here's a little bit about my background just to let you know. In addition to the 40 career coaches and workshop facilitators and interns that I supervise at CTC, I've also been a volunteer coordinator for many years with a number of different organizations. And in my personal life, I've also done a lot of volunteering. I found that not only is it a great way to share skills, give back to the community, but it also helps to keep our networks ever growing, keep our skills fresh, and learn constantly. So let's delve in. In terms of what we're going to cover during this session, we want to answer some questions about volunteering. So let's start with the why we volunteer, who to volunteer with. That's a big question. How do I get started? What kind of work do I want to do as a volunteer? And how do I integrate this into my resume so this can really help me create a paid opportunity? Because I think that's really the bottom line for a lot of us in transition is, can this lead to a paid position for me? And volunteering is actually one of the best ways to help fill in the gaps in your resume and help lead you into a new paid position. So without further ado, let's dive into that. The benefits of volunteering. So I think one of the things that's really great about volunteering is it allows you to really step outside of your comfort zone and try something new. So the interviewing process and the preparation and our education aren't always a fit for a volunteer position like they would be for a professional position. And so there's an opportunity to do things that really kind of reflect our passions and interests, our hobbies, and also expose us to something that we might not get in an otherwise professional setting. So why do we volunteer? Well, I mentioned that for a lot of us, it just feels really good to give back. We all like to use our strengths and work to our potential. Certainly when we're in transition, there's a sense of some loss of value, some loss of purpose. And so this is a really great way to stay in a professional environment, meet new people, and be able to contribute. And I think that's one of the greatest values of working professionally is that we all have something to offer. So these are some of the benefits that you want to consider. And for each of us, we're going to recategorize these. So as they're listed, for some of you, career exploration might be at the top of the list, whereas for others, it's like, I really need to fill in that gap on my resume while I was out of work or while I was taking care of an elderly parent or whatever the situation was. So for each of us, you really want to take some time to assess, why do I want to volunteer? Because as you're exploring these different positions and different opportunities, this should be part of your criteria. Networking. This is really a key benefit to volunteering. It's a great way to kind of try it before you buy it, I like to say, right? We get to test drive a job or an industry or a specific field of work by volunteering. We're not making a long-term commitment to an organization. This is a great way to start building a network and meeting new people that otherwise might not fit into our network, right? So we're all at a place where we have former colleagues and friends and people that work in our field within our network, within LinkedIn perhaps. But in order to really branch out and find a new opportunity, sometimes you need to literally meet new people that work for these other organizations. So networking is a key factor in volunteerism. I think one of the other great benefits of networking is employers are more and more particular. They can afford to be. There's 4 generations in the workplace right now. Positions get filled through personal contacts. A lot of jobs aren't even posted, so you may not see the best positions listed on npo.net or Idealist or Monster or any of those. They may be internal hires, and so getting into an inside track and having a network within that field is going to be really beneficial. It's going to cut through the competition. You're going to spend less time on the job boards kind of blindly sending out resumes and more time getting to actual decision makers, actual players within that organization and within that field. So a couple more questions I want you to pose to yourself as you're kind of processing this idea of where to volunteer and what do I want to do. What are my values? How about strengths and talents? Now there's experience. There are the tasks that we've performed in the past, the skills that we have, and then there's strengths and talents, and there really is a difference. So let me give you a little bit of a distinction. Strengths are the things that we really do best. And this is what sets us apart from the competition. And talents are also a little bit different from skills. You may learn how to manage a database, for instance, but do you really have a talent for that? Are you intuitive about it? Can you go beyond and understand how to run reports and understand the full capabilities of that system? So really identifying what your strengths and talents are is an important process in deciding where you want to volunteer. I think the best way to determine that if you're unsure is, what do you feel really good about when you reflect on the work you've done in the past? What were you proud of? What made you feel good? Those are likely your greatest strengths and talents. So now that you've determined that and what your values are, what organization is going to allow me to utilize these strengths and talents? And oftentimes when we're looking at volunteer or internship positions, they will list the actual job duties. And you can also research the company through its website and other resources to see what do they really value and what are they looking for in volunteers and staff. So do your values and your strengths and talent match that? Can you see yourself applying those attributes to this particular organization or not? And finally, part of your criteria should include, what do I want to gain from that experience? And in this case, I don't want you to just think about it, but actually write down some bullets, the same way you would do on your resume when you're addressing past positions and what outcomes you achieved. I want you to actually go ahead and do that. Write down 3 or 4 bullets of what you want to gain from your volunteer experience. So maybe it's, I want to learn a new skill, or I want to expand my network by 10%, or I want to learn more about this particular company and what they do. Whatever it is, I want to learn what a development officer does. It could be as specific or broad as you like, but actually write down some specific outcomes for yourself in terms of, if I go volunteer there for 3 months, will I be able to achieve this? Have that in mind. These bullets are going to be the questions that you ask when you talk to a volunteer coordinator at an organization. So you're way ahead of the game if you have these prepared in advance. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about experiential learning. That's an opportunity to really get some hands-on training as a volunteer that will fill in the gaps on your resume. So perhaps you want to change from one field to another and you really don't have any experience managing events. So you want to get some event management experience. One of the best ways to do this is to volunteer for an organization that does fundraising events. First of all, it's a great way to network. You get to attend the events for free as a volunteer. So it's a great way to get the inside track. And also, you're going to be charged with some specific duties. And here's the great part, no experience necessary. They'll actually train you. So it's a great way to improve your skill set, expand your skill set, network effectively, and kind of test out an organization and a job. So a lot of us, when we're in school, we think, oh, when I graduate, I want to do this job. And then when you actually go out there and do it, you realize it's not always what it's cracked up to be, or I thought it was going to be different. I thought I was going to be in more of a team environment and be more collaborative, or I thought it would be a little more satisfying than this. Volunteerism is an awesome opportunity to get to do that very thing, to really try it out before you make a commitment. Seek out different positions within an organization and see where that fit is for you. Sometimes there's no way to know unless you actually do it. So a little bit more about internships. I think traditionally we've thought about them as something that high school and college students do, right? But internships can be for everyone. There's a lot of organizations that offer internships, both in the corporate and the nonprofit sector. These often lead to full-time jobs. Because it's such a competitive marketplace and hiring managers really want to make the best decisions, they're making a huge investment in hiring new people. Internships are a great way for them to try you out before they buy as well. It's an opportunity for them to screen candidates, get them some hands-on experience, and see how they fit with the team. And certainly if you have a successful internship with an organization, they're going to keep you on as staff. This is the reason they do internships, is they want a whole field of candidates that they can have cycle in and out until they find the one that's just right for them. So definitely look into internships as well. There are paid and unpaid internships with both corporate and nonprofit entities. So how do I even find a volunteer site? Now I've kind of identified what my goals are, what kind of outcomes I'm seeking from this experience, what I want to learn, what my values are. So where do I find them? So here's just a sampling for you, and there's a lot of other places to look. You can certainly go and just Google volunteering in Chicago or volunteering in whatever city you live in. But let me give you a bit of a jumping off point. If you're in the city of Chicago, Chicago Cares does a lot of project-based volunteerism, so that can be great for filling in gaps on a resume to do like a project that's either short or long term, getting some very specific experience. So, working an event, getting specific experience, planning an event from beginning to end. Chicago Cares is really ideal for that. Speaking of ideal, idealist.org is a fantastic website for jobs, internships, etc. It's a national site, and they have very specific search tools. So you have to enter quite a bit of data in terms of what city, what exact type of position you're looking for. Do you want it to be an internship or just volunteer? How many hours do you want to work? What type of work do you want to do? So you can be really, really specific about what you're looking for. It's a huge search engine, and you'll get a lot of opportunities through there. Lumity is another great site. They particularly have a lot of projects that are technology-based, so if you're trying to learn some new software skills, that might be a great place to start. NPO.net is kind of the quintessential nonprofit website if you're looking for jobs, internships, or volunteering with a nonprofit. Even if you want to go into something that is for-profit, you might want to look at volunteering with a nonprofit organization, only because they may very well have an opportunity for you to gain some experience there that you might not gain otherwise. Look to your faith communities and community organizations as well. A lot of them are welcoming to volunteers, and you can often get on a committee right away, have a built-in group of peers to work with on specific projects and tasks. You will always be welcomed with open arms to faith communities in terms of doing volunteering, because they never seem to have enough, and they're completely volunteer driven. They have very few paid staff. So anything that happens in terms of events, fundraising, communications, newsletters, things like that are done by volunteers. So lots of opportunities there. And I'd be remiss in not mentioning professional and trade associations. And I did mention LinkedIn. This is a great group to follow on LinkedIn. Look into whatever professional association is a fit for your field. So if you're a fundraiser, there's a professional fundraisers association. If you're a sales professional, an HR professional, you want to join HRMAC, the Human Resource Management Association, right? So for every professional field, there's a professional association. Definitely start following them in any groups related to them on LinkedIn, and look into researching them in terms of volunteer opportunities as well. Almost every professional association has a free annual luncheon where they welcome prospective new members. Great way to network, great way to meet people within that field. They also do, almost all of them do, an annual conference, and you can save the $400 for the conference fee by volunteering for the event. And often it's something as simple as greeting people, doing registration, something like that. And yet you've got your foot in the door. You can attend all the workshops and seminars. You get to meet people who are not only volunteers, but also all the staff and board members with that association. I really don't think there's a better way to get your foot in the door than through a professional association's annual conference. It's the place that everyone in that field will be, and there's no reason why you need to join or buy a ticket when you can volunteer. So keep that in mind. Okay, if all else fails, start looking to your personal network. Where are your friends and family volunteering? What about the people who have the job that you would like to have a year from now? Who are they volunteering with? Look at the LinkedIn profiles of the decision makers with companies that you're targeting. Do they have an affiliation with a local organization? No better way to have that connection when you talk with them than to say, oh, I volunteer for the Boys Club as well. That's so wonderful. I've been tutoring there, or I've been teaching baseball. And so take a look at where other people in your network or your prospective network are volunteering as well. Great way to make connections. Also, do your target companies have an overall community service relationship? So a lot of big corporations have a commitment to one or more nonprofits where maybe they sponsor an awards dinner every year or something like that. If they have a special nonprofit organization that they support or that their employees do volunteer work with, there's no better place to start in terms of volunteering. So let's explore networking, something that no one really likes to deal with, but we know this is the key to really leveraging our career transition into something successful. So why is it uncomfortable, and how can volunteering be a remedy to this? Let's take a look at this perspective on networking. Shake this up a little bit. So we're all familiar with these uncomfortable feelings. We don't want to ask people for help. We don't want to ask for a job, right? Rejection is always a major fear. or just not knowing how to approach a situation. So I think we need to look at networking in a very new way. It's really about building relationships, and it doesn't have to be a one-way street. When you meet someone who's a potential contact, someone that might be a decision maker with a company you're looking at, you have something to offer as well, even if it's in a volunteer way. So look at it as a conversation you're having with someone to learn a little bit about each other, and maybe they have a need in their organization that you can fill. And that's not asking for a job. That's just saying, oh, well, I've managed a lot of databases over the year. I'd love to help you guys get set up with this. Or I'm familiar with this new software system. I could help you launch that, or I'd be happy to train your interns on that. Great way to get your foot in the door. Having conversations doesn't obligate anyone. And organizations that are looking for dynamic professionals, they want to have those conversations, so they're very willing. Just asking for advice or asking them to talk about their position and how they got into it is another great entree to starting a conversation with someone and building a relationship. People like to talk about themselves, so starting with questions about them. Tell me how you broke into this field. Tell me what you love most about this company. What's your favorite aspect of your job? These are the kinds of questions that in no way indicate that you're asking for anything, and yet they're going to provide you with a lot of valuable information about that organization. A lot of it's just rethinking how we approach networking. So for those of us who really want to leverage our volunteerism into a new career, here's some of the points you want to keep in mind. Ask for informational interviews. Send a LinkedIn invitation, and not just a connection request, but actually write something in that box on LinkedIn. Mention how you know this person, who their connection is, or I had the opportunity to meet you at this event, or I volunteer there. I would love to connect and speak specifically with you about this, or I have a couple questions I hope you can answer about your organization. Again, not a big obligation, not a big ask, but always attaching a personal note to those LinkedIn requests really encourages people to respond. One of the other things you want to keep in mind when volunteering is that you're going to develop some new contacts, references, and hopefully even recommendations down the line for your next position. Okay, the power of LinkedIn. Really important. If you're not getting a lot of traction with your LinkedIn profile right now because maybe you haven't identified exactly how you want to rebrand yourself for your next position. Maybe you want to transition into a new field and so you don't know how to describe yourself. I urge you to create a new branding statement. You can change it from week to week as you informationally interview, as you get volunteer experience, as you learn more about yourself and who you want to be in your next position, but keep it fresh. Keep it up for a week or so. See if you're getting any response. Oftentimes, just changing one or two keywords in your LinkedIn profile will be just the thing to get the attention of those in the field that you're seeking to enter. Also, let folks know that you're looking for a new position. Let them know what skills as a volunteer you have to offer. Again, it's a much more soft and subtle way to ask others for help. LinkedIn recommendations from your colleagues. Everyone should have 3 recommendations on their LinkedIn profile. Okay, asking for a referral. So referrals are really a key component to building relationships. But again, we want to keep this, we want to maintain and build the rapport that we have with these individuals. So we don't want to hit them kind of right away. with a request. You need to really understand how strong this relationship is with your supervisor or colleague. Sometimes it's a matter of time. So your second week in a volunteer position, you don't want to ask for a referral right away. Give them some time. Let them take notice of the work you're doing. Have some interactions. Contribute a bit before you ask. When you get to the point where you feel comfortable asking someone for a referral, or even better, a written recommendation, offer to write the recommendation yourself or provide them with an outline. People really appreciate that. I've had such a positive response from colleagues whom I've requested recommendations from when I give them a little guideline. You know, I say, I know your time is valuable. Let me just prepare a statement and a few bullets of what you can highlight, you know, things that we worked on together as colleagues. Let me make this as easy as possible for you because your time is so valuable. They really appreciate that. In fact, some people, when you ask them to write a recommendation, may even ask you to write it them yourself and send it to them for approval. And in most cases, they hardly even edit it, if at all. So always take that first step. Again, we want to approach networking by not just what we want to get out of it, but what we can offer. Think of it as a two-way street, and we always want to meet our contacts halfway. So if you utilize that guideline, I think you'll have great success in getting a positive response from people in terms of referrals and recommendations. And a little more on this on LinkedIn. So in addition to 3 written recommendations, you're probably familiar with the endorsements section as well. So that's important, not quite as important as written recommendations. Those really speak volumes. But endorsements also can help to highlight new skills. So that's something you can add through your volunteer work. Maybe you didn't have any event planning experience prior to that. And your former colleagues, they're not going to know about that. So you need to go to this new group of people that you've been volunteering with and have them endorse you in those skills. Okay, so let's get down to the practical application. How do I take my volunteer work and integrate it into my resume? And the most common question I get is, do I include my volunteer work under a separate category that just says volunteer, you know, which we usually put at the bottom of the resume, right, even after education, or do we include it in the experience category? I'd love to give you a straight answer, but it really depends on the situation. So let me pose a couple questions to you to help you determine where you would put this volunteer experience on your resume. Was this a one-time thing, maybe one event or one day of service that you did, or was it an ongoing contribution that you made to this organization? Do you have big gaps in your resume that need to be filled in a bit? How long ago did you do the volunteer work? And do you want to work for this particular organization, or were you just seeking to gain some specific skill from them? Or was it something that has no career application, but something you were just passionate about? Maybe you did a fundraiser at an animal shelter because you love to be around dogs. And that's wonderful, and it has a place on your resume, but maybe not under the experience category. So let me try to answer each of these a little bit and get you thinking about it. If this was a one-time or one day of service, that's really not something you want to put under the experience category with your other professional work. That needs a separate category. And you can call that volunteerism or community service or whatever you choose. If you have some significant gaps in your resume, doing some project-based work or ongoing volunteerism is the way to go. That's how you want to fill in those gaps. How long ago did you do the volunteer work? Well, does it chronologically fit into where those gaps are in your resume? If it was volunteer work you did 10 years ago, does it have a place in your resume? Well, it does if you're covering 10 or more years of professional work, then you can certainly include it. But if you're only covering the last 5 or 6 years of employment, then maybe not. If there's something that you did that was really relevant to a job that you're looking at, just put that in the cover letter. Mention that you worked for that organization as a volunteer. It shows that you have some skills, some firsthand knowledge of that particular field. It's worth mentioning. It might not have a place on your resume, however. Okay, so should your volunteer profile differ from your paid work experience? Another common question. Not necessarily. So this is where you really have to dissect the volunteer work that you've done or the work that you're currently engaged in doing as a volunteer and break it down with outcomes. So remember at the beginning of this webinar, I talked about creating actual bullets. What do you want to accomplish in your volunteer work? Well, if you did accomplish those outcomes or others, if they were equal to a paid position, then you absolutely should include that under professional experience. If they're compelling, if they're quantifiable, that's just like a paid position. You should include that under work experience. So I've got a sample for you we're going to look at to kind of explore this. So if you look at, and this is from an actual resume, my actual resume, so you'll see, and obviously I changed the names of some of the organizations. So at XYZ University, as the Director of Alumni Relations, launched a full-time Office of Alumni Relations for a 60-year-old graduate school, served as a liaison between the school and the Alumni Association. And you can see I quantified my 3 contributions. I added numbers, percentages, dollar amounts to give some real outcomes so that there's a kind of a measurable outcome, if you will, to the work I did. So that's great. I don't think anyone would argue that that's, certainly does have a place under professional experience, right? So then let's look at the next one with the People's Lobby. Managed over 30 phone and door knock canvas events for an Illinois state representative, resulting in his winning the election, replacing a 15-year incumbent. So I gave some details about that position and then contributions. Just like the position above, I quantified with numbers, percentages, and dollar amounts. So my conclusion, and of course the second position there, yes, that was a volunteer position. Okay, so that was unpaid. The university position, the first one, that was a paid position. But when you look over that, isn't the second one just as compelling? Didn't I create results, quantifiable results, and make a significant contribution that was my own? I would say yes. So in a case like that, if you can quantify and lay out in the same format as your professional experience, the work you did as a volunteer, then you should include it under professional experience. So what if you don't feel comfortable with that? Maybe you can't really quantify what you did as well, or the volunteer work you did only lasted a couple of weeks or something like that. You might want to create a secondary header on your resume. And, just a few common ones that people use: volunteer experience, community engagement, civic contributions. If you want to know what the best header would be, look at your target companies, the organizations you really want to work for as a paid professional, and see what they talk about on their website. A lot of corporations will talk about community engagement, about how their employees give back and do volunteer work, how they're a local-based company that cares about contributing to, the city in which they exist. So look at the language. Do they use any of these words? If so, those are key words you want to include in your resume. Other things you can do: reduce your word count and still keep a results-oriented statement. So we won't have the bullets like we did on the previous one, but here's an example of some work that I did with Heartland Alliance over the course of about a year and a half, 2 years. I still quantified a little bit, right? I was able to paint a picture for that hiring manager of kind of to what extent was I engaged in collecting these items for families, for the refugee families. But it wasn't quite enough to include under professional experience, right? So there's an example of something you could put under a volunteer experience category. I think it's still really compelling. It shows a great commitment that you made to this local organization, that you were able to create some outcomes for them, and that you made some contributions. It also speaks to specific skills, right? So my organization skills, fundraising, things of that nature. So when I look at my LinkedIn profile, I want to make sure that I have endorsements under fundraising and organization, because those are things I'm addressing in my resume, okay? So that's a way that I expanded my skill set and my endorsements a bit, but it wasn't quite strong enough to put under professional experience. But it still means something to a hiring manager when they see that. So a couple examples. So finally, the last thing I want to talk about today is using CARS. And that's an acronym that we use here at CTC, which is a concise and really memorable story that you're going to share during networking and during your interviews. It's going to express what talents and strengths you possess as a professional and how you deliver results to a company. Because really that's what we know hiring managers are looking for, is how can you solve my organization's problems? What sets you apart from the competition? You know, if I'm going to interview 50 people, what is it about you as a project manager that's so superior to every other project manager I'm interviewing? So you're going to reflect a little bit on past positions you've had, and these can both be paid and unpaid. Cite a challenge or a circumstance that you faced in that position, what action you took, and you want to be really specific with that action section. You're going to need 3 or 4 sentences to really describe your process and how you address the challenge. And then the result should be one powerful sentence that's quantifiable, okay? So that's your CAR. You can do those for your volunteer work. Every volunteer situation presents challenges. So you cite that in one sentence. Again, 3 or 4 sentences describing how you served and what action you took. And then the final sentence is your result. Like for events, for example, your result might be that you raised $50,000 at a fundraising event, which was a 10% increase from the previous year. And you had gone into details about how you helped to contribute to that. So your R, that final sentence that you do for result, that's one of the bullets that now goes into your resume under that volunteer position. Okay? Great guideline. It's going to take you a while to think about this and kind of craft your CAR, but something you definitely want to do. Okay, so at this point, I'd like to conclude by saying that volunteerism is always going to be beneficial to your career. Making a determination about where it fits into your resume is something that you want to really think about. And I hope that the guidelines presented today will help you make that determination in a sound way. In terms of further discussion that we might have, there is another webinar on our CTC YouTube page that I recommend. It's by Marty Gabauer, and it's called Mastering the Art of Informational Interviewing. I think it's a great supplement to the topic we discussed today and a great way to delve deeper into how to do informational interviews, how to build your network in a way that's very organic and doesn't feel as though you're really asking or soliciting another person. So check out Mastering the Art of Informational Interviewing. That concludes today's webinar on volunteering, making it count in your career. I hope you found it to be helpful. And if you'd like to learn more about the programs and services we offer here at CTC, visit our website at www.ctcchicago.org. Thank you.